Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. This is where we break down all the essential news you need for the UPSC exam.
All right, we've got a lot to cover today. We're going to start with some major global and national security issues. Then, we'll dive into the thick of election season and what it means for federalism. After that, it's all about the digital world, some scary new scams, and policy updates. And we'll wrap things up by looking at the economy, the environment, and what's happening in our society. Let's get into it.
First up, let's talk about some really critical developments, stuff that's impacting India's relationships abroad and our security right here at home.
Okay, so let's start in West Asia, where things are getting pretty tense. And this could have some major consequences for global energy supplies. You've got the US-Iran nuclear talks basically on hold, which puts the spotlight right back on the Strait of Hormuz. Now for India, this is a huge deal. We get a massive amount of our oil through this tiny choke point, so any disruption, well, as our defense minister said, it's a stark reality. It hits our energy security, our trade, and even the millions of Indians living in the Gulf. And the whole thing is governed by this really important legal idea, transit passage, which comes from the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UN clause.
Okay, and this is where it gets interesting, because this slide clears up something that trips a lot of people up in international law. You have two concepts: innocent passage and transit passage. Now, innocent passage through a country's waters? Yeah, that can be suspended if there are security concerns. But transit passage through a critical international strait like Hormuz? Nope, that cannot be suspended. It is an absolute guaranteed right. Remember that distinction? It's a classic prelims question.
All right, let's shift our focus to internal security and look back at the tragic Pahalgam attack 1 year later. The good news is tourists are starting to come back. But the economic hit, especially for the local poniewala economy, was just devastating. But the real takeaway here, from a security perspective, is how the strategy has completely changed. We moved away from just trying to contain threats in cities. Now, it's all about a proactive, intelligence-led grid that's spread out everywhere. It's high-tech, using things like AI, drones, and biometric mapping to get ahead of threats before they happen.
And this is a fantastic illustration of just how nuanced the situation is in Jammu and Kashmir. Here's a common trap in the prelims. Assuming AFSPA, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, is applied everywhere. It's not. It's district by district. And another key thing to remember since 2019, J&K is a union territory with a legislature, but Ladakh is a UT without one. Simple difference, but super important.
Okay, so from the sensitive security situations, let's move right into the heart of our democracy, elections. We're going to talk about the rules of the game and some of the push and pull in state governance.
So, it is officially election season, and things are really heating up. Down in Tamil Nadu, you're hearing a lot of talk about big social justice topics like the caste census. Meanwhile, in West Bengal, the first phase of polling is already underway. And all of this action brings us right to a core concept you have to know: the Model Code of Conduct, or MCC. This is the Election Commission's main tool for making sure everyone plays fair. But here's the key thing to remember. It's not a law passed by Parliament. It's a voluntary code that all the political parties have agreed to follow.
Right, so you have to be super clear on what the Election Commission can and can't do here. Under the MCC, the ECI can absolutely issue warnings or even file a police complaint against a candidate. But, and this is the big but, it can't disqualify someone just for breaking the MCC. That power, it lies with the courts under the Representation of the People Act. And sticking with Tamil Nadu for a minute, let's talk about this Dravidian model of governance. It's this interesting mix of social welfare programs and a big push for industrial growth. And it seems to be working, attracting a ton of investment. But this has also created some friction in federal relations, especially around the governor's role. And that brings us to Article 200 of the Constitution. You know, there was this big standoff, but the Supreme Court stepped in this year and clarified things. They ruled that a governor can't just sit on a bill forever. It really reinforces that the ultimate power lies with the elected legislature.
All right, let's switch gears completely and head into the digital world, where things are changing at lightning speed.
Wow, this next story is genuinely terrifying. It's a reminder of just how sophisticated these cybercriminals are getting. It's called the digital arrest scam. Basically, scammers pretend to be police or CBI officers on a video call, and they scare people into giving them huge amounts of money. It's a massive threat. Now, we do have laws to fight this, like the IT Act for identity theft and the new BNS for cheating. But the problem is, these scammers are often in other countries, which makes actually catching them incredibly tough.
Okay, and when it comes to fighting cybercrime, you have to know who does what. This is a common point of confusion. You have the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, or I4C. Think of them as the coordinators, the ones who work with law enforcement. They're under the Home Ministry. Then you have CERT-In. They're the tech experts, the ones who respond to security incidents, and they fall under the Ministry of Electronics and IT. Two different bodies, two different ministries. Got it?
And you know, the regulators are really trying to keep up with all this change. Take these two recent moves. First, METI is talking about making it mandatory to label AI-generated content. That's a direct shot at fighting fake news and misinformation. At the same time, the RBI is making our lives a bit easier by raising the limit for automatic bill payments. So you have two different actions, but they're both driving at the same core idea: building digital trust. You need that trust for the whole digital economy to work.
Okay, for our final section, we're going to look at a mix of topics that are really shaping India's economy, our environment, and society as a whole.
All right, let's talk EVs. This is a classic tale of two cities, and it really shows you just how much policy and infrastructure matter. On one hand, you've got Delhi. Their EV adoption rate is a whopping 13%. Why? Because they've got strong government subsidies and a ton of charging points. Then you look at Gurgaon, right next door, and it's only at 6%. The big hurdle there, a real lack of charging stations, especially in apartment buildings.
So when you hear about the government promoting EVs, they're usually talking about one of two schemes, and it's so important to know the difference. First, there's FAME. Think of this as helping the demand side. It gives a subsidy directly to you, the person buying the car, to make it cheaper. Then you have the PLI scheme, or production-linked incentive. This is a supply-side push. It gives money to companies to get them to actually build the EVs and their batteries right here in India.
You know, we don't always get good news on the climate front, but here's some. A new report says that for the first time this century, the amount of electricity we get from fossil fuels globally actually went down. And India is a huge part of that positive story. We added a record-breaking amount of solar power last year. This lines up perfectly with our big climate goals, our Panchamrit targets, that we announced at COP26.
Okay, lean in for this one, because this is a classic exam question. It's all about the net zero target year. You'll see a lot of developed countries like the US and the EU aiming for 2050 to become carbon neutral. But India's official target is 2070. And that's not a random number, it's based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. Definitely a key fact to remember.
This is just a heartbreaking story out of Kerala, and it puts a huge spotlight on industrial safety. An explosion at a firecracker unit, it just shows you the incredible risks involved. So what's the core concept here? It's the regulations. Believe it or not, these places are still governed by the Explosives Act of 1884, and the main agency in charge of licenses and safety is called PESO, the Petroleum and Explosive Safety Organization, which is under the Commerce Ministry.
All right, a truly massive national exercise has just kicked off. After a long delay because of the pandemic, we're finally starting the first ever fully digital census. And you can't overstate how important this is. The data from the census is the backbone for, well, pretty much everything, from redrawing political constituencies to targeting welfare schemes. And while we're on the topic, it's so important to be clear on the difference between the census, the NPR, and the NRC. They get mixed up all the time.
And this slide lays it out perfectly for you. Let's break it down. The census, which is done under the Census Act, is simple. It counts every single person in the country. The NPR, the National Population Register, is done under the Citizenship Act, and its goal is to create a list of all usual residents. And then you have the NRC, the National Register of Citizens. That's a totally separate process to identify who is a citizen, and so far it has only ever been done for Assam.
So when you step back and look at everything we've talked about today, from geopolitics and energy, to digital scams and elections, to building a green economy, you see how connected it all is. The real challenge for India isn't just about growing fast. It's about how we can manage all this transformation to make sure that the growth we achieve is secure, sustainable, and most importantly, that it includes everyone.
If you're ready to really practice all 8 mains questions from today's news, and you want to get your hands on Prelims MCQs and detailed notes, go ahead and download the complete PDF. Just scan the QR code on your screen or use the link in the description to join our Telegram channel. Keep up the amazing work, stay consistent, and I will see you in the next explainer.